Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Devoted to the business of purveying food and decanting wines, Food and Wine Radio is a unique program highlighting not food recipes or wine vintages, but how to make a profit while satisfying America's palates. In this competitive but highly rewarding sector, many men and women have made profits while fulfilling a dream. Food and Wine Insider is all about better managing any business involving food and wine. Each week, your co-hosts sit down with successful restaurateurs, food mavens, winery vintners, store owners, food suppliers, and other leaders in the worldwide industry that centers on foodstuff and wine. In frank give-and-take sessions, guests and panelists talk about the business of bringing healthy and pleasurable foods and wines to others. Your Food and Wine Radio host are Ann Daw, former president of the Specialty Food Association and a longtime food executive who has held senior positions both here and abroad with Kraft Foods and Philip Morris. Don Mazzella, a nationally known business commentator. On each show, they invite leaders of the world's culinary and wine industries to share the secrets of their success. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
Our next guest, Ann, is here to talk about dates. She is Colleen Sundlie. She's the founder of Date Lady, and she's here to talk about all things dates, which I happen to love. Colleen, welcome to the program.
Thank you for the invitation. It's good to be here.
Okay. And then I'm going to turn it over now to Ann.
Hi, Colleen. Just by way of background, I just want to introduce you. You're Colleen Sundlie. You're president of Date Lady, a supplier of dates and date syrup and products made from dates that you're now sourcing from the U.S. It's a family-owned company that now offers an organic California date syrup. So, Colleen, welcome to Food and Wine Insider.
Thank you very much.
I would love for you to start by talking about what you were doing before Date Lady.
Sure. My background is in advertising and marketing, so I had years of experience both on the client side and working for an agency, and that encompassed, some years of different employers. And then I eventually got married, became a mother, and moved to the Middle East. And that is how I got acquainted with the date business.
So what exactly inspired you to start a business that is all about dates?
Well, whenever we moved to the United Arab Emirates, I've always been a foodie and just really into food and cooking. And as I mentioned, we moved over there with a 2-month-old baby, and so I had all kinds of time on my hands. I was doing a tiny bit of consulting over there, but besides that, I was just being a mom. And so Henry and I would go visit all of the markets, and there you can't go anywhere without being greeted by dates and Arabic coffee. So it doesn't matter if you're going into someone's home or you're going to the health club, there will be a huge platter of dates and Arabic coffee waiting for you. And so I really got into the date culture, and it was so different, especially then in the U.S. People have kind of had, dates have a negative connotation here. Now that's changing because you're seeing them on menus all the time, wrapped in bacon, or just, you hear about dates all the time because of their health benefits. But even 10 years ago, people were suspicious of dates. And a lot of people didn't even know the difference between a date and a prune and a fig. So to go to the Middle East and see date boutiques with literally, 50 to 100 different date cultivars being sold and at varying prices per kilogram was just amazing to me. I never realized how beautiful and how different dates can be.
Yeah. So for you, what were some early lessons learned about a product that I guess, originally needed to be imported.
Yes. We originally imported it from Israel, and then we started using Tunisian dates. Actually, we had it produced in Europe using Tunisian dates. We learned lots of lessons. That is something I had never done before, ever. So we learned about working with a customs broker and, all about the FDA regulations and just the cost of transport on varying different ways to get it here. And it was definitely a trial at first, but I really actually enjoyed that side of it. I've always really been into traveling and different cultures and that type of thing. So it was actually fun for me to deal with different date suppliers in different parts of the world, and the logistics side of it was really interesting as well.
Okay. So how, anything in particular that sort of surprised you as you got into this business and you went, oh, wow, if I had to do that over again, I would have done this. And
oh, I don't even know where to start. There's so many things. I mean, I think one thing that we learned right off the bat is it does not matter it doesn't matter what people tell you about their product. You have to test it out for yourself. Case in point, the very first product that we looked at importing, because nobody was doing date syrup in the U.S. at this time. And it was really hard to source because, California and Arizona are the only places well in the U.S. And then it's only a really small percentage because dates really need a desert climate. And there weren't enough dates to produce the date syrup, for one thing. I mean, even California and Arizona farms, they still import dates because of the demand here outpaces the supply. But anyway, so we're looking for a date syrup in the Middle East because, people are doing it over there. But the problem at that time was there really weren't any organic suppliers. There were literally less than 4. So we almost purchased our first syrup from a certified organic date farm in Egypt. And I went and visited this farm myself and everything. So we're getting ready to make our first order. And we sent the syrup out for more lab testing. And we actually found lead in the product. Speaking of lead.
oh, my.
It was unbelievable. I mean, this is an organic certified company. And it was just a real eye-opener.
So what did you do? What did you do?
Well, we just immediately went to the only other organic certified product that we felt good about. And that was in Israel, and that all ended up working out. But yeah, we broke our relationship up with Egypt because we realized we really could not trust their farm. I mean, somewhere, despite their best intentions, there was lead, coming into their soil or the water supply. And so, we just, we had to move on. And so it was a major delay, though. It was launching the syrup at least a year after we thought we were going to. And then, there were different issues with that supplier too. And so, yeah, I mean, you always have to check things out yourself. You can't even believe all of the paperwork, And one of the main reasons that I got into this business, besides just really being overcome by the beauty of dates, I've always been kind of a clean eater. Or not kind of, I just always have. I've just always been into really simple and pure foods. And so for me, it is absolutely essential that the authenticity of the food can be proven. So I think, in some cases, there are probably larger companies that wouldn't feel the need to take the extra steps. But we've found out the hard way that it's essential. Sometimes things are not how they look.
I think your advice about making sure that you check out your sources of supply is really so critical, because even with the Food Safety Modernization Act, it is on the manufacturer to ensure that the sources of supply also, follows the regs and follows what it is you want in your product line. So I think that was a really fantastic piece of advice. I want to shift a little bit and ask you how you initially funded the business, and where did those funds go towards as you started out?
Yeah, great question. We're solely funded by friends and family, and then we've also had a couple SBA loans. And we've just grown, I would say, relatively slow, or not slow. We've had a great increase every year that we've been in business. But because we haven't, gone after any venture capital or anything like that, we probably have grown a little slower than some of the newer companies on the market now. But I think it's been good for us. We've been able to, kind of take our time to think about things and learn as we go. But yes, until this point, we've just been funded through family and friends.
What have been your biggest initial expenses then? Where did, the funds tend to go to?
Mostly, I would say raw product and operating expenses. So our business is a little different in that when we're producing, even in the beginning, we're bringing containers of syrup. So, a 20-foot container full of syrup, because you really can't bring a pallet or two of syrup in at a time. Then the cost of goods is way too high, and the retail price point is too expensive for the customer. So we're bringing in, containers of product at a time. In the beginning, just the very first year, I believe we brought in 2. And so we were paying for those containers before we sold anything. So in the beginning, that was, a definite expense where having some friends and family were helpful. And then, since then, we do everything here in-house in our facility. And at first we rented a building, but now we actually own a building. We bought an old 1940s ice cream manufacturer. It used to be an ice cream manufacturer. And so we, purchased equipment, and we purchased this building. And then really besides that, it's just operating expenses, employees, and packaging and that type of thing.
Okay. I'm Armenian by background, so I absolutely know what a date is. I know what dates are. I know what figs are. I know what hummus is, and yogurt, because I grew up with all of these things. But how do you market your product? Because dates really aren't in the mainstream here. But then again, neither was hummus not that long ago. So how do you talk about it?
Well, our key product is date syrup. And so when we started marketing it, really we were talking about the benefits of it being an alternative sweetener, more than we were talking about the aspects of it being a date product. And really the thing that we wanted to do the most was make the brand sexy, so to speak. Because I think that's one thing that the date industry in the United States has not done well. And that is to market dates for what they really are. Beautiful. I mean, in the past, they didn't know what to do with dates. They took them and they chopped them up and they rolled them in sugar. They diced them and put them in a metal can or in some really high fiber, horrible tasting cereals. It's like they were kind of trying to use them. But, when I came back from the Middle East and I had fallen in love with dates, I was like, they need a facelift in the United States. They need a brand that markets them to the right people, to the foodie, to the organic and natural food crowd and that huge overlap there. And so that's kind of what our primary goal was just to make them presentable in a fun packaging that would appeal to the right crowd.
So when you're saying that it replaces other sweeteners, are you talking? What are you talking about when you're saying people should use this syrup instead of what?
Instead of maple syrup or honey? And I actually don't mean instead of. I mean in addition to. I'm a huge maple syrup and honey fan as well. But date syrup is different than honey and maple syrup. It's not quite as straightforward sweet, and it has more of a complexity, I would say, generally speaking. And so not only can you use it on pancakes like you would maple syrup, but you can use it on all kinds of cheeses, blue cheese, chev. In New York, Murray's cheese, they're a perfect example of someone that just really gets our syrup. They use our syrup in their on several of their cheeses there and in their restaurant, and it's a real versatile sweetener. So yes, you can use it like you would maple syrup or honey, but it's really a standalone condiment. It's good for so many different applications.
So so is it a premium to maple syrup and honey? I mean, how would I look at the retail selling price of your product, and what would I be comparing it to?
I would say, in the beginning, it was comparable to maple syrup and a good raw honey. But now I would say that we're a little bit lower on the price scale as we have increased our efficiencies and we've been able to produce more dates at one time. We've lowered our prices. So if you're looking at a 12-ounce bottle of date syrup, the retail price on that is about $6.99.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned earlier about what you use date syrup for, etc. As a diabetic, my question is, where does it rank in terms of whether dates add to the sugar or not? For instance, I used no sugar maple syrup. Could I use date syrup as a substitute?
That's a question that we get a lot, and I'm always hesitant to give direct advice on that because there are so many different ways that people, diabetics go about their diet. We know of a lot of people that do have problems with hypoglycemia and diabetes that love our product, but they're not following the normal protocol. They're eating more of a diet with less refined carbohydrates. They're eating more of like a paleo type of diet, so they're not really consuming any other sugars, so they can eat fruit. And for people that are just, they're following the typical diabetic protocol, and if their doctor is telling them not to consume as much fruit, then date syrup might not be a good idea. But because essentially it is a fruit, so it's going to have sugars just like the date fruit will. However, it does have a great balance of fructose, glucose, sucrose. So our California date syrup is lower on the sucrose end. So it's something that is more manageable for the body than a table sugar would be, for sure. It also is full of potassium and magnesium, more so than honey or maple syrup, much more so actually. And it also has a lot of trace minerals and amino acids in it. So it's really a nutrient-dense sweetener.
I just finished doing a series of interviews for the American Diabetes Association. And my doctor always recommended everything in moderation. So, and I've been a diabetic for a long time, and I don't want to stay too long on the subject, but if I heard you correctly, if you're careful with it, you can use it as long as you don't overuse. Did I hear that correctly?
You're absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, with that one, I'll turn it back to you, Anne.
Thanks, Don. So, Colleen, who helps you with the business?
Well, my husband works full time here, and then we have had several different mentors over the years, people that we've met at different specialty food association programs and trade shows and that type of thing. So that's definitely been very helpful as well.
Okay. And so how are your products distributed? I'm assuming you distribute to the marketplace. You don't need to be refrigerated, but maybe you could tell people that.
Yeah, that is actually a real interesting topic for me right now, distribution in general. We do work with some smaller distributors, and you know, when we first started the company, we were like, we've got to get into as much distribution as possible. That's the only way to have a successful business. There was a lot more to it than that, but it's just kind of in a nutshell, that's what we thought. And then we just realized, you know, number one, people have no idea what date syrup is. So you walk into Whole Foods and you have a sea of maple syrup and honey and other things in front of you, and then you've got one bottle of date syrup, and you're either not going to see it because you didn't come in to look for it, or you need somebody telling you about it, which as a small business, we can't afford to, properly educate consumers in every store. So we have really kind of taken a back seat to the distribution strategy. We actually pulled out of UNFI and DPI, and we have stuck with our smaller distributors around Garden Spot and Crown Pacific and some of these that cover different regions, because they're easier for us to track where we're selling, and they work with us more on advertising and marketing, and they're easier to keep a tab on as far as in-store promotions and that type of thing. And then we're just focusing online. We sell a lot of product on Amazon, and we, you know, in different online channels and on our own website as well. And then we have direct contact with the customer. And we're also getting that direct feedback with reviews, which is so helpful for us as we grow our business. And now that we are more into social media, we're getting people contacting us saying, hey, I would really like to see you at our, you know, my store. I buy you on Amazon, but I want to walk into such and such store and purchase your product. So there's still obviously, you know, a huge desire for us to be on store shelves, but we actually don't seek out the major distribution as much. I mean, I think that there will be a time for that, but in having to watch cash flow and the money that it takes to make that marketing happen for the big distributors, I think we're in a good place right now with the strategy of just sticking to the smaller regional distributors and then focusing online as well.
So if I could just have you explain a little bit. So if I think about your sales, what proportion, well, I would say in general, how big is the business at this point in terms of sales? And then what proportion of that are you finding you're selling online versus in store?
Well, okay, so we have three major channels. So we've got online, and then we have to the retail store, and then we also sell a lot of B2B. So we sell the date syrup in 595-pound barrels to different food manufacturers that are wanting to use a cleaner sweetening ingredient for their nutrition bar or their nut milk and that type of thing. And actually, honestly, it's been pretty evenly divided between the three. So I would say roughly we sell about a third B2B, a third online, and a third to retail stores. And it was at one point much more heavily retail stores. But our online business and our B2B business have increased dramatically. And then we realized as part of our strategy that we don't want to be with the giant distributors yet.
Right. So in terms of sales, you're approximately how big at this point?
We are just under $1 million.
Okay. Sure thing. What has been your proudest moment to date?
Well, honestly, I think it probably, there's so many proud moments whenever I hear from a customer and I picked up the phone because the person that usually answers the phone wasn't here last week, and it was a customer who had some questions, but she told me that she's replaced all of the sweeteners that she was using. She replaced them with date syrup, and she has lost 10 pounds in the past month, and that's the only thing that she's changed.
Wow.
And that happens all the time. We hear that all the time on Facebook messaging and people sending us emails, similar stories to that. And it's because they're making lifestyle changes, and it's really awesome to be part of that. So those everyday moments really make us feel like we're in the right business. We feel like we have a product that people not only enjoy the taste of, but it's making their lifestyle better. I think the other thing would be winning a Sophie for the date syrup was pretty awesome because a lot of people, when you tell them about date syrup, they're like, oh, that sounds healthy. But I've always from the very beginning said, I would never sell anything just because it's healthy. Like, I'm a foodie. It's got to taste awesome.
Absolutely.
And so it was a great confirmation to get a Sophie because you got the most important people in the food industry judging those events, And so that was a great confirmation.
It's been a fascinating time. Colleen, your website again and how people can reach you?
ilovedatelady.com.
Can you spell it out for our audience and slower?
ILOVE, ilovedateslady.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook. Our handle is The Date Lady.
Well, and I have to ask a question. How did you come up with that name?
Do I have time for 60-second story? I'll just go for it anyway. I was doing a demo at a grocery store. Actually, when we were test marketing it, and I was demoing it on this Norwegian cheese and cracker, and this lady came by, and she was crazy about it, and she kept asking me where to find that specific cheese and cracker to go along with the date syrup, and she just couldn't find it. And I said, you know what, I'm getting ready to put the demo away, and I'll go help you find it. So we went back to the cracker section, and somehow we got lost, and this woman was just really gregarious and adamant about, finding all the things that I had used. And so anyway, all of a sudden I hear her yelling from a different aisle, hey, date lady, where'd you go? Anyway, I was telling my husband about it later, and he had actually suggested that name when we were brainstorming it, a couple years before that. And we were like, that's it. That's definitely the name that we're going to stick with.
Well, Colleen, we thank you so much for joining us. And Anne, you get to say the last word.
No, Colleen, thank you so much. I had so many other questions to ask you, I hope we have the chance to do that again. Keep selling. All the best of luck to you. And I think you have something really unique. And differentiated and important in terms of the food supply. So keep at it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the encouragement, and thank you again for the invitation to be on the show.
To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Kabbage can help. Kabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Kabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Kabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry. And with $4 billion in funding, Kabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Kabbage at kabbage.com/food and wine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's kabbage.com/food-and-wine. Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz. I want to tell you about Bob Bethel. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. Dan Perkins with your featured book.
You are listening to Ann Daw and Don Mazzella, and the program is Food and Wine Insider. If you have a question or know someone you think our listeners should hear, contact us at foodandwineinsider.com.
And America is probably one of the best places on earth for having concerns about animals. The Livestock Conservancy is one of many concerned with their well-being and that of protecting consumers. Here to talk about the conservatory is its director, Alison Martin. Alison, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm going to turn it right over to Ann.
Thank you, Don. You know, Alison, I was reading your background and I was reading about the Livestock Conservancy, and there's just such a lot of wonderful work going on. A little bit more about having read your background. I understand you raised poultry and waterfowl and rabbits and horses. Maybe this had some influence on your future career, more than 20 years in poultry science. And I guess your particular focal area had been on the health and vaccine development, especially for poultry. You also have a PhD in genetics, and you specialize in disease-resistant poultry. So welcome to Food and Wine Insider. Please tell us about the greatest influencers in your life that led you to focus on Livestock Conservancy and your specific work in the disease resistance in poultry.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, I've been in some form of agriculture and farming for my entire life. I actually grew up in my early years on an agricultural experiment station. My dad was a USDA researcher, and he raised and did research with root crops, so sweet potatoes. And this was in Puerto Rico, so we worked with tropical yams and other tropical crops like that. And my dad was a big influence on me from that side because he had a real interest in world hunger and helping people raise their own food. And that was a big influence on me. And he and I raised a lot of those poultry and rabbits and so on together. But my mom was also a big influence because she grew up on a cattle ranch out west in California. And so that was where we spent vacations when I was a kid. and I grew to love animals and had to have had to surround myself with them, as you can tell from my bio. So when it came time to go to college, it just seemed natural for me to try to find some way to work with animals. And as I got closer to a career, a professor at University of Florida made me aware of a lot of career opportunities in poultry science. And so that, along with having raised a lot of poultry, is how I ended up going in that direction.
And how is it that you came to specifically the Livestock Conservancy? How did it lead you to that particular organization?
Well, I first found out about the Conservancy when I was a student studying genetics at Virginia Tech. And at that time, they were starting the first ever census of poultry. And what a census is, just like a census of people, is counting our animals. You know, if we want to say something is endangered, well, how endangered is it really? And we find this out by counting. It's easier with livestock because with livestock you have registries and pedigrees, you know, much like you do with dogs, for example. And so you can go to those organizations and find out how many livestock they're registering. But with poultry, you actually have to call the people that raise them on the phone, or these days we do it through internet surveys and find out how many chickens and turkeys and ducks there are out there. So I found out about that, and I thought it was just the coolest thing in the world as a genetics student that people were saving endangered breeds. And I actually applied to the Livestock Conservancy when I was about 20 years old. It's probably good they didn't take me then. I had a lot of learning to do. But then many years later, after going into, as you said, you know, I did a lot of years of developing health solutions, and particularly vaccines and manufacturing vaccines for poultry and livestock. And then when I was looking for a new direction for my career, it happened that the Livestock Conservancy, which is based very close to where I live, was in need of somebody to take on the direction of their programs at that point in time. So I first came to the Livestock Conservancy as the program director.
You know, I want to talk a little bit more about the Conservancy because I was reading about it, and there's so many different things that you do. But can you, in a nutshell, just talk about what's the mission of the Livestock Conservancy, and why do you feel the work that they do is so important?
Well, our mission is to protect endangered livestock and poultry breeds from extinction. And what it's really about is protecting our farm biodiversity. So the endangered livestock and poultry, we call them heritage breeds, and they're the equivalent of heirloom vegetables. And so having a robust ecosystem of genetics, of options for consumers is important to the present and the future of our agriculture system.
So you're saying heritage breeds. If you could give us a little bit more of a definition, maybe some examples would be helpful, and why you feel it's really important to preserve those breeds.
Heritage breeds are the breeds that our great-grandparents grew up with that have kind of fallen out of favor with mainstream large-scale production systems. They don't fit readily into large-scale production systems. So you would be talking about breeds like heritage shorthorn cattle or Navajo Churro sheep or Pomeranian geese and so on. These would be breeds that, for whatever reason, when we started consolidating our agricultural systems, our farms, into larger farms that were more managed, instead of animals foraging for themselves out on pasture, we said, no, that's okay. You don't have to worry about going out and finding your food. We're going to provide you your food at the same place every day and make it easy for you, and that way you can grow faster and be more productive for us. And also, on farms like our large-scale farms, we have a very uniform and predictable product for the consumer. You have a pretty good idea that the poultry that you buy in the grocery store is going to be pretty much the same every time you buy it, and there's not going to be a lot of variability. Where that variability literally lives, is in these older breeds, these heritage breeds. But because they're not used in large-scale agriculture, they've fallen by the wayside, and as I said, many or most of them are now endangered. And this is important to our future because of we don't know what the future of farming or climate change or consumer tastes or any of that will bring. And so how can we throw away what our ancestors developed over centuries when it might provide exactly what we need in the future? And, one example of that the Livestock Conservancy had a really important part in is heritage turkeys. So heritage turkeys have made a really wonderful comeback as an option for the holidays. Well, in 1997, the Livestock Conservancy did a census of breeding turkeys and found that while there were plentiful broad-breasted turkeys, which is what the commercial industry raises, that heritage turkeys, there was only about 1,300 breeding turkeys left. They were clearly on the brink of extinction. And so we had to go to work fast. And what we did was twofold. One was to make small farmers, aware of this and get them interested and help them learn how to raise heritage turkeys. So we worked directly with the farmers and added a lot of new farmers raising heritage turkeys. And then at the same time, we partnered with others to develop a marketplace and to help consumers understand what a wonderful flavor option that you get with the heritage turkeys. And so just 10 years later, we'd tripled the population, more than tripled. It was up over 10,000, and it's continued to grow since then. In our last census in 2015, we found 14,500 breeding turkeys. So that's tenfold increase from what it was in 1997. And consumers get it. Consumers have figured out that the flavor that you get from a heritage turkey is very different from what you get from a store turkey, and they love having that option.
Yep. Don, I'd like to turn to you. Do you have any questions for Alison at this point?
I'm listening in here, and I'm going to turn it right back to you because you're doing such a good job of really getting out what the conservatory is all about. It's ironic. I had heard the story of the heritage turkey, and believe it or not, one of my last stories that I did as a reporter for a newspaper was on heritage turkeys many years ago. So I'm just sitting here, just enjoying listening. So back to you after all of that.
Thanks. Thank you, Don. I'd like to talk a little bit about how is the Conservancy funded? How do you keep it going?
Sure, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and so the majority of our funding comes from individuals just like you, and so the folks that understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and send in their donations or become members, because we are a membership organization, and while about half of our members own and raise heritage livestock or poultry on their farms, about half of them don't. And they come to us in large part because they understand conservation, they understand the importance of preserving the biodiversity, not only of our natural lands, but of our farms too.
So how big is the budget that you have to do the work, the important work that you're doing?
Well, we've been at about 600,000 a year for the last couple of years, and I'm very pleased to say that that's going up each year, and that we've just gotten a large grant for some work to be done in the Northeast, where we're going to be working with cattle and sheep producers and expanding some marketplace options for them in the Northeast.
You know, grants, there's a whole industry in terms of grant making. Is grants from, do you find that pursuing them from private or from government sources? How do you manage that? Because, you know, clearly 600,000 isn't a lot of money to do what you're doing, and you're doing a lot of terrific work. Grants are a terrific way of trying to get the right funding and have it focused on a particular area. So do you find pursuing, you know, the private sector grant making or public sector or government grant making? Where do you go about trying to get the funds from the grants?
The majority of our grants come from the private sector, and many of those are, you know, oftentimes it's family foundations or individuals who have you know, been fortunate to accumulate some funds and want to support the work, and then we occasionally will seek and get public grants from the government. Those tend to be more research focused, and that's another piece of what we do. So, for example, we had a grant a couple of years ago looking at heritage pork, and we worked with several partners to understand, you know, what is the production and carcass values of heritage pork. You know, when a chef or a consumer buys it, what can they expect to see? So those kinds of research grants, we can get government funding for those.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if I were to ask you, because you've been with the Conservancy quite a while, what are your top 3 key successes that you really like talking about?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. Can you? Yeah.
No, sorry. If I were to ask you, so Alison, if I were to ask you to step back, you know, you've been with the Conservancy a long time. If I were to ask you, of all the things, all the successes the Conservancy has had, what are the top 2 maybe that are closest to your heart in terms of accomplishments and successes by the Conservancy?
Well, certainly the heritage turkeys, as mentioned, has been a really important accomplishment. But also we've made some accomplishments with sheep and goats. So as goat cheese and goat meat and lamb have grown in popularity, Americans are eating more ethnic foods and being more experimental in our diets, and this has helped some heritage breeds. So Nigerian dwarfs, when they first were recognized by the Livestock Conservancy, they're a small goat, and they were kind of thought to be a little bit of a pet or a novelty. They're cute and very child friendly, but it also turns out that they are great milk producers. And so a lot of people who wanted to raise heritage breeds raised Nigerian dwarfs. Some of them also raised Oberhasli, which is another dairy breed. And over about 15 years, the Nigerian dwarfs went from being kind of a hobby breed to actually being, numerous enough that we graduated them from what we call our conservation priority list, our endangered breeds list. And so I'm very proud that those have found a home that they no longer need to be watched over continuously. In the same way, Katahdin sheep were another one that were a little bit of a novelty when they joined our list, because they're a hair sheep, they don't have wool. And as the American lamb market grew, a lot of producers realized that, hey, shearing our sheep every year is something that we don't really want to do. And there's some interesting breeds out there that you don't have to shear. They shed instead of growing wool. some of them have the side benefit of being a little more parasite resistant. That helps the farmers out. And so Katahdin sheep got really popular, and you'll find them as a grass-fed option in a lot of areas and in a lot of restaurants.
I think that's terrific and certainly great education in terms of the work that you all are doing to bring these breeds. Alison, on the opposite side, what roadblocks to progress have you experienced in moving your mission forward, and where have those roadblocks come from?
Well, two roadblocks. One is that there's some breeds of livestock and poultry that it's really tough to make them more mainstream. I'll give an example of one that I think ought to be more mainstream than it is, and that's certain kinds of egg-laying breeds of chickens. They're just a little bit less likable personality. They're what we call flighty. They're kind of nervous and they'll run away from you and that kind of thing. And people don't like that personality in their chickens as much. And so we've kind of struggled to get them, out of the critical category in some cases. So sometimes it's finding the right fit for the breed on the farm.
We have had outbreaks such as the bird flu, and some of the immediate reactions have been to kill off all the birds in the flock. You have provided some really sane advice on what limits the potential of avian flu. Could you just talk about that in very simple terms, what causes the outbreaks and how anyone should really handle meat and poultry?
Well, what causes the outbreaks is birds that fly to the U.S. As part of their migratory pattern from other countries where avian influenza is either having an outbreak or is more common. And then the migratory birds can carry avian flu to different parts of the U.S. And so one of the immediate things for people that are raising chickens and even backyard chickens is to make sure that you don't have contact between your birds and particularly wild waterfowl. So the wild ducks and other waterfowl are the most common carriers. And if you've got a pond on your place where these birds like to come and swim around, that's great, but keep your birds away from that pond area so that they don't accidentally get contaminated. But then, from the consumer standpoint, for the most part, the consumer doesn't need to worry too much if you're buying processed poultry meat, or eggs. If you're buying from a small farm, you shouldn't have too much worry about, accidentally getting avian influenza yourself. Now, both you and the farmer will probably want to make sure that if you're visiting their farm to pick up eggs, that you're not actually coming into contact with their ducks and geese and chickens, because what if you and your kid were at the park yesterday and you were feeding the ducks and you don't want to accidentally carry something onto somebody's farm. So clean shoes that haven't been to the park, clean clothes. These are some real simple things that you can do to help protect the farms that you're buying from.
It's very interesting. Having been to Australia, Australia is very ecologically minded. And if you come into the country, one of the questions they want to know is, have your shoes been in any kind of dirt? Because all that potential contamination coming into Australia is something they're trying very hard to avoid. You were talking about the farms just now. Are they diminishing, or do you see a resurgence in people wanting to have a farm?
Oh, I definitely see a resurgence in people wanting to have a farm, even if their farm is just 6 chickens and maybe a goat or something like that. It's really come back, and I'm so encouraged, because I've been in agriculture for so many years, and I don't mind saying that I'm in my 50s. That there was a time not so long ago when we looked at the trends of farming, and farmers are getting older, and their children oftentimes are not replacing them on the farm. And we said, okay, well, where are the next farmers going to come from? And now I feel like we've got the answer, because it's from the young people, and a lot of times they're young people who are coming from urban and suburban backgrounds who don't have a farming background, but they want to do something that has meaning, and they find a lot of joy in farming, and that's really where organizations like the Livestock Conservancy come in, because we do a lot of education with farmers to help them succeed in their farm enterprises. The farmers are such an important part of what we do. This is not like a zoo where we have preserves set up or anything like that. And so for heritage breeds to be successful, then the farms that raise them have to be successful, and that means that they've got to be able to make a profit and not have losses or anything like that, and that's part of the training that we do, is helping folks connect with the husbandry practices and the marketing practices that'll make them a success.
So if you had one piece of advice to give to someone who wanted to be a rancher or a farmer raising poultry or cattle, what would that be?
Oh, wow, just one? That's tough.
What's the first thing?
The first thing is go slow. Just bite-sized pieces. Start small and add one thing at a time. You don't want to get into it too quickly, too much. You've got to expect that there will be a learning curve, and be patient with yourself.
Alison, your website and how people can reach you and all that good stuff to help the conservatory in its mission?
Sure. Our website is www.livestockconservancy.org. And we've got tons of information out there, including a breeders and products directory, where if people are interested in finding farms near them that they might be able to work with directly or to buy products from, then they can find them through there. And then a lot of background information. People particularly seem to love looking through our breed profiles, clicking on the individual breeds and learning the rich histories and backstories of how they came here and what the breeds are all about.
Thank you so much for being with us today. To me, it's been illuminating, and I hope it is for our audience. And a final word?
No, Alison, thank you so much. I think everything that you're doing, I had so many more questions for you I think we could talk for another hour, but I really appreciate it, because I think the work that you're doing is really getting us all back to our heritages, right? Because a lot of things did start out on family farms and just people making sure that they could, feed their families, and then feed their neighbors, and then feed the towns and the cities, and getting back to that, I think is just so really important. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing with the Livestock Conservancy, and I think it's just terrific. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll add one last piece in case you want to mention that we work with military veterans, because some of the things that you just mentioned, a lot of military veterans who come from rural backgrounds or small towns, they want to feed their families, they want to feed their communities, they want to make a difference in their own local area, and a lot of them find that through farming with heritage breeds.
Well, that's a great note to end on, because you know how much we support our military. Thank you so much for that last bit of information, Alison.
Well, thank you both for the opportunity to talk to you today. I really enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.